I'm saying what he said and what my daughter said and what I said in those 3 police interviews determined what the police said, how the police acted, what they did after that, their next steps, how they treated the entire case like it was self-defense.
Trial number 2 for Doomsday Mom Lori Vallow Daybell. Now in Arizona, she's accused of conspiring to murder her 4th husband, Charles Vallow, allegedly motivated by life insurance and doomsday prophecies. Previously convicted in Idaho for murdering her 2 children, whom she called zombies and dark spirits, Vallow Daybell is now representing herself as her own attorney. I'm Justin Lum, and we are on the record. Jury selection for Lori Vallow Daybell's trial is just days away. If you've been following this saga, you know the significance of this very case. Charles Vallow, a husband, father, and brother who loved Lori very much and recognized she needed help back in January 2019. Divorce filings first obtained by FOX10 revealed Charles claims Lori threatened to kill him, believed she was a goddess, and aimed to lead the 144,000 into the new millennium. Charles also told Gilbert police, and shortly after his former attorney Taylor Larson, these disturbing details filed in bombshell divorce papers. Charles cared about his wife, his then wife, Lori Vallow, and he wanted her to get help. He says that on body camera footage. But what did he state to you that was alarming, and that you knew that there was some alarm?
Yeah, I mean, right away he that's what he wanted, was her to get help. There's something wrong with her. I'm living in a nightmare. She's not my beautiful wife who I've been married to, and I want her to get help. And it really, I think he did not want to be in our office. He did not want to get divorced, but he felt that it was the only way to kind of wake her up and to protect JJ. That was his main goal, was to protect JJ. He wasn't worried about so much his own safety. It was more about JJ, securing JJ's safety. But he did say, if something happens to me, it's Lori and her brother Alex that did it. And he's like, tell everyone after, if something were to happen to me. And so right off, that's alarm bells in my mind, obviously. But as his attorney, I can't divulge that information unless he gives me the green light. So you can say he was the initial alarming, voice.
And this was 6-7 months before he was shot and killed.
Yeah, about 6 or 7 months.
July 11th was the day.
Yeah, so he came in about the end of January, so just about 6 months.
He predicted his murder.
Absolutely predicted it, and that was the most shocking thing to me when finding out, when I got the call that he had been shot and killed. I wasn't representing him. We had terminated the divorce because he had secured JJ's safety. Like I said, that was the number one thing, and he had fled to Houston and was going to live there and had JJ, and he's like, I don't want to go through with the divorce. Hopefully she'll get the help that she needs. And he told me that he was working with family members of hers to try to get some sort of intervention, something that would help get her the help that she needed so that they could be a happy family. That was his end goal.
And it never worked out.
No, I would say the opposite.
Yeah.
And through the trial, we were able to kind of see that, right? So everything that Charles told me when I represented him came to light later and was corroborated and vindicated through the evidence produced at the trials.
Charles also told Taylor that his bank account had been drained by Lori, about $35,000 taken from that account. He filed this divorce to get full custody of their autistic son JJ because he feared something bad would happen. Eventually, the couple would reconcile, but just months later, Lori's brother Alex Cox shot and killed Charles after what he described as a fight at the Chandler home, claiming self-defense. The timeline leading up to Charles's murder provides a roadmap we got to see in Vallow Daybell's Idaho trial. Text messages, emails, audio recordings, and interviews with police all played a big role for the prosecution in showing the jury context and what ultimately led to 3 murders in a small rural community. Lori and her now husband, Chad Daybell, deemed JJ and Tylee dark spirits, even zombies, and did the same for Chad's then wife, Tammy, even discussing death percentages for all three victims. That pattern started with Charles Vallow long before Lori moved from Arizona to Idaho. Charles was known to her inner circle as Ned Schneider, or Hiplos, while she was having an affair with Chad, who fed her visions of the future and told her who was light and dark in her life. Meanwhile, Charles was trying to stage some sort of family intervention before he was shot and killed. Here's what we know via Chandler PD's probable cause statement recommending the murder conspiracy charge for Lori. It says Charles began talking to Lori and Alex's brother, who we know as Adam Cox, about his discovery as well as Lori's radical beliefs. The two then communicated with each other to plan an intervention on or around July 10th, 2019. During this time, someone that is redacted, Lori and Chad, continued to message about Charles, aka Hiplos. Much of this document is redacted as well, but it concludes by saying there is no obvious communication found between Lori Vallow and Chad Daybell to show that he was directly involved with the planning of Charles Vallow's murder. Lori Vallow found out about Adam coming to town through her mother and another person whose name is redacted. Remember, the county attorney declined to file any charges against Chad, even though Chandler police did submit a case for him. Now, meantime, Lori wants Charles's phone from Chandler PD's evidence to be extracted as far as the data by her special expert witness. Now, she made this statement during a March 18th pretrial hearing, and her expert witness goes by the name of Lonnie Dworkin, who specializes in digital forensics. Listen to this exchange from the courtroom regarding that evidence, and watch how Lori calls Charles Vallow her husband.
Mr. Dworkin, if you want him to do extractions, you're not ready for trial. So in order for him to do the work that he's requesting, getting copies of a laptop or a cell phone or whatever the case may be, that's going to take him time to extract and analyze and then prepare a report. Months, maybe.
I understand that, Your Honor, and I'm hoping he can do it in an expedited manner. I requested him from OPDS on January 14th. He got approved on March 7th
Well,
from OPDS.
you're the one pressing for your speedy trial, so you kind of have to make a decision on, we're set for trial. You want to go to trial, or you want to have him do that work that you want? Because I don't think both are going to happen. Even if he got the laptops today, generally those types of things can take weeks, even months to analyze and prepare a report on.
I understand that, and I also understand that I've only been given 10 hours for him from OPDS, right? So if he could spend 10 hours this week getting them ready, then he can give us a report with the best that he can do.
Well, the report's already late technically, but if it were allowed, first of all, it's going to take time to coordinate him getting the, let's start here. Specifically, what are you requesting? Because the state wasn't clear whether you were requesting items here impounded by a particular police department or items that may be impounded in Idaho.
Well, I'm sure that my investigator would like to have all of those things done, and I realize that we're on a time constraint, and I would be only concerned with one item, which is at Chandler Police Department, which was Charles, my husband's phone, Charles Vallow's phone. And I would like a copy of the extraction that they took from it. The digital forensic extraction from Chandler Police could be given to him immediately. That would be very helpful.
Wasn't that already disclosed?
Yes, Your Honor.
Was that part of the initial terabyte?
Yes.
Excuse me.
Yeah.
Everything that I have is on a 22 terabyte. So if
Hard drive.
hard drive. So if I give that away, I can't do my work.
Well, can't you make copies of files out of it?
22 terabytes.
I understand that.
Okay.
So what's your proposal?
I'll take it up.
I mean, if you have all that information in a file. I'm not saying you have to copy the whole 22 terabytes, but there's a file in there somewhere that's the Cellbrite extraction already for that requested item that's been in defense possession for however long now.
You would think that Lori Vallow Daybell and the investigator on her defense would make a copy or copies of the 22 terabytes of evidence for any potential expert witness that they brought in. Also important to note, she could take the stand to testify on her own behalf, which the prosecution indicates is likely. If that happens, Vallow Daybell has to write down her questions and have her advisory counsel ask her those questions as she's on the witness stand. But this opens the door to cross-examination by the prosecution, and the state will motion for Arizona Rule 609, impeachment by evidence of a criminal conviction. The jury will hear that Vallow Daybell has been convicted of other crimes, but they may not hear the specific nature of those crimes. Vallow Daybell can request that they only hear the fact that she has been convicted, and that is all. The jury will be instructed to only use this information strictly to determine credibility. Now, Kay Woodcock is Charles Vallow's sister. She's a key witness and will be testifying in her third trial. She has a lot of information as she alerted authorities to the suspicion of her brother's death and much more. Here's what she had to say about facing Lori Vallow Daybell once again. What is it going to be like to sit in that chair as a witness and testify and be cross-examined by a convicted killer that you knew so well?
I have thought about that a lot, and I really don't know. I don't know. I look forward to it. I'm not afraid. I look forward to talking to her, being face to face, because she has not seen me face to face through her trial, even when we did our victims impact statements. She was on the side. They had it arranged, and did not like how they had it arranged in Idaho for that. But regardless, I got to say what I needed to say. And so for this, I really don't know. I'm anticipating it. I'm not anxious. I just want to get it done. And I'm no telling what's going to happen with her. There's going to definitely be a circus there, just as probably as much as a judge will allow. But she's going to definitely make it into a circus, no doubt.
In the first trial in Idaho, as you testified, I mean, you're right. You were never really face to face. She didn't say much in her own trial. She didn't even testify. She was at one table, and you just focused on the prosecution and the defense, and sort of you're telling your story to the jury. But this time, I mean, how do you control your emotions when she will be trying to poke holes in your testimony? And is there more pressure in this case for getting justice for Charles?
I don't know about controlling emotions with her. That we'll see what happens. I can't promise anything. I just know it's in my personality is not to just be publicly. I don't display a lot of emotions publicly. Not crying, not sadness, anything like that. However, um, God only knows that question, the answer to that question, because I just don't know. But and what does justice look like for Charles? It looks like whatever she is allowed to get. I have zero doubt she'll be found guilty for conspiracy to murdering him, and I believe she will get the maximum. What I don't even know what the maximum is. It doesn't matter. It just matters that she is there. She is uh, taking accountability for her actions and for starting this nightmare. And now it's come full circle, Justin. It started with Charles, then it was Tylee, then it was JJ, then it was tried to be Brandon, then it was Tammy, and she was involved in all that. So now we're coming back to where we started. We're made a full circle back to Charles, And this is exactly how he would have wanted to do it, because he would have wanted women and kids to go first. And because he was the always a gentleman. And that's how he would have wanted it. So I'm glad it came this way. Um, I've got a lot of mixed emotions about it being coming full circle and maybe being over. I don't know. I haven't figured all that out yet, but um, for life to get back to normal for myself and Larry and my family will be not having this hanging over our heads for the first time in 5 years, 5+ years. Um, who knows? I don't know. But maybe it's time I'll be able to get on to the next chapter of my life.
This saga is long, twisted, and of course, bizarre. Money, power, and sex was the theme laid out by prosecutors in both Lori and Chad's trials. We know Nate Eaton with East Idaho News has covered this case as long as we have, and so we had an in-depth conversation on what to expect in the next two trials. All right, Nate. Well, let's dive into what trial is going to look like. And first off, the marathon of it all. You and I have now covered two trials, Lori Vallow Daybell's trial in Idaho and Chad Daybell's trial in Idaho. Now here we are in Arizona. Just talk about, from your perspective, the grind. How do you prepare? How do you get through a trial of this magnitude?
It is mentally exhausting, as you know, because you're in the courtroom trying to understand everything that's going on, listening to the testimony, live tweeting in our cases, and then trying to make it so that our people that aren't in the courtroom can understand what's going on. And then it's physically exhausting too. I hope that the benches in Arizona are not as hard as the ones in Idaho, but we will see what happens with that. I believe this trial will be shorter because, the stakes aren't as high. Chad was facing the death penalty. Lori was facing, it was murder charges. Not that these crimes are less significant, but also the fact she's representing herself. I think if she had her actual, attorneys with her helping, the trial would be longer. But a lot of people that represent themselves don't know what they don't know. So I don't envisioning this taking 2 months. I guess we'll see, though.
Yeah, each one is so different. Each one is unique. In Idaho, for Lori's trial, we were operating old school. We were inside the courtroom, we were live tweeting, and we were waiting for the full audio file
Right.
at the end of each day. And you had a sketch artist
Yeah.
in the courtroom, and that's the way it was. And it lasted for 6 to 7 weeks, and it was a grind. And we saw a lot of graphic evidence as well, exhibits that people still remember to this day. And then Chad's was more evolved, where we had the Zoom cameras and the live stream was going on, and you had different angles in the courtroom. So it was more advanced. But now here we are, and we've got the cameras in the courtroom. We've been watching her here in Arizona before this trial, and now the focus is on Charles Vallow, the victim in this case. But we got a good roadmap of the evidence, anything that has to do with Charles, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, and I actually think we got a lot of that before the Idaho trials even happened. Remember when Chandler did that big, huge release of information of the videos, of the text messages, the audio files, photos, things like that? Man, was that like October several years ago?
Yeah.
And that is, those things really pertain to this case here in Arizona versus the Idaho story. I mean, they all intermingle with each other. So this will be a completely different trial. I mean, Lori's and Chad's were pretty similar, and there were some differences. We did learn a lot of new things during Chad's, but it'll be interesting to see, too, how much the Idaho stuff plays into Arizona, or if they just kind of leave that out or put it to the side and really focus on what happened to Charles, in July of 2019.
This is a good question, because in Idaho, they kept arguing, the state arguing to let that Arizona evidence in,
Right.
whether it was from Chandler or Gilbert. And Lori's team argued against that, but each time the judge allowed it in because it had context to what was going on
Right.
in Idaho. I don't know if that happens here, because we're rewinding back in time to where it all started with the first murder, the first death with Charles Vallow. So what does that look like? But that is definitely going to be the focus, with all the emails he had, the phone calls, the text messages, and how is Lori involved in the conspiracy? Because we know that the shooter in this case, the person who pulled the trigger on Charles, is Alex Cox. And we've learned a lot about him as, and you have through trial evidence, as being the protector, as being her angel, right?
Right. Well, the interesting thing to me, Justin, this morning I was going through kind of the testimony of the Arizona detectives when they were in Idaho. How is she going to argue as a defense attorney and the defendant that right after Charles was shot, his phone ends up with her, and she goes to Burger King. They tracked the phone to Burger King, to Walgreens for the sandals, and then to JJ's school, and then goes back to the house.
She's gone for an hour.
Right, with his device.
Yes,
as
in his car.
As he's laying on the ground dying after being shot. How do you explain that? And why did she not call 911? And why did Alex wait to call 911 for 52-something minutes or nearly an hour? So that right there, that's going to be a hard obstacle for a defense attorney to overcome.
Yeah, and how does she represent herself in all of the legalese, I guess? How much help will she need from her counsel? She seems to be confident that she has this together, but she has these public defenders on the sideline waiting to help her, but she hasn't had the experience that they have. And we think that this is going to be a shorter trial, but do we end up seeing holdups because of what she does not know as her own attorney? That's going to be interesting.
Right. Well, and the judge earlier on, when she made this motion to, act as her own attorney, you and I were both in the courtroom that day when he said, or wait, maybe I wasn't at this hearing. I believe you were, where he's like, "Are you sure? Do you understand that your two attorneys right now have more hours and years of experience than you do?" I mean, I think he really tried to get her on the record in case there's appellate issues with it. The big question, too, Justin, is ultimately, whatever happens at this trial, she's still going back to Idaho to serve life in prison. Whatever happens at Brandon's trial, she's still going back to Idaho to serve time. It is nice that justice for Charles and Brandon is actually happening, that they're not just like, we just won't worry about it. But on the other hand, maybe that's what she thinks. Just get it done with and get me home, or get me back to Idaho.
And she really has nothing to lose. She's serving 3 consecutive life sentences for what she did in Idaho. And now we're going to have 2 back-to-back trials. We'll see if they're back-to-back, one for Charles's murder, and then the attempted shooting with Brandon Boudreaux. So we have light spirits, dark spirits, and the inner circle of Lori Vallow Daybell and Chad Daybell. These are characters that you know very well and that we've seen testify in these past 2 trials. How do we see people like Melanie Gibb, Zulema Pastenes, how do we see them be involved in this trial, or will we?
That's a great question. It makes me wonder who the other witnesses will be, and how much the Arizona authorities will go into the background of all of the religious beliefs. I would imagine that they'll show that body camera footage where Charles says, "I'm possessed by a Ned Schneider."
Yeah.
And I imagine that they'll, talk about how those court documents when he went to file for divorce, about how, she's a goddess, 144,000. Do they call Melanie and Zulema to testify that, yes, they observed these things, and that Lori was teaching these things, and that, Chad was too? And how big of a deal will Chad be in this trial? Because he's not going to get charged in Arizona, at least to this point he hasn't been, and they don't think there's enough evidence to try him. Will they bring him in, or will they stick solely to Lori? And imagine Lori trying to cross-examine Melanie Gibb and Zulema.
Her best friend.
Right.
Her former best friends,
And how is she going to maintain her emotions so that she's not, super emotional or super aggressive in a defense type of situation? That will be interesting.
I mean, these were the people that she was so close to and texting with back and forth during this time in 2019, and talking about doing energy work and how dark Charles was becoming, and calling him Ned or Nick, and calling him Hiplos, and these names that were for these dark spirits, and they were talking about this. So you would assume that this evidence would be brought back in because it was in the Chandler release. And surprisingly, I think for us in the first trial, Idaho really dove into the religious realm of all of this for the jurors to try and understand.
Yeah, I think you kind of had to there to understand why they would come up with an excuse or a reason to kill JJ and Tylee. Ultimately, the prosecutor said, yes, religion played into it, but it wasn't one of the main reasons. Their
Money,
their
right.
theme, money, power, sex. Will Arizona go along with that as well? Will their prosecutors? They've had 5 years now, well, I guess 4, a little over 4, to prepare for this trial in Arizona. And the prosecutors, as far as I've observed, every time, we've seen a court hearing, they seem ready to go here in Arizona.
I want to thank Nate, Kay, and Taylor for speaking with me ahead of the Doomsday murder trial. That's going to do it for us on this episode of On the Record. March 31st, jury selection officially begins for the Vallow Daybell trial. And once a jury is seated, we'll be right back here streaming this trial from start to finish. Join me for live analysis throughout the day, and we'll have special guests joining us, including legal experts. Make sure to like and subscribe to our channel for full coverage.